Good morning. My name is Stacy Lindberg, Manager for the County of Orange Adult Protective Services Program. On behalf of the County of Orange and our World Elder Abuse Awareness Day, or WEAAD Committee, I want to welcome all of you to our very first virtual WEAAD event. WEAAD was launched on June 15, 2006 by the World Health Organization at the United Nations to promote a better understanding of elder abuse. WEAAD events have been happening in Orange County, California for about 10 years, some very small and some large enough to take place in a university. Our hope is for professionals in the community to become more aware of elder abuse and what and who they can call when they suspect elder abuse. We are glad you have joined us here today. Next slide. Now for some housekeeping information. This webinar is being recorded and will be available to all attendees in case you would like to go back and reference any of our material. You have all been muted by our webinar administrator, so we can avoid any unnecessary background noise. The hand-raising feature has also been disabled. Your audio, how loud we sound to you, is controlled by you. You can adjust this volume on whatever device you are watching us on. There is also a handout section with some uploaded materials that are available now for you to download and keep. Next slide. What you are seeing now is a screenshot of the GoToWebinar questions section. During the presentation, you will be able to jot down any questions for our presenters. We have committee members reviewing these throughout the presentation and will ask them of our speaker at the end of our presentation. Your questions also might be responded in some helpful web links. Please remember not to wait until the end of the presentation to ask your questions, as our committee members will be gathering these for the speakers throughout the presentation. Next slide, please. Our WEAAD Planning Committee has been working for the past 7 months on this event, and while we're disappointed that we're not able to meet in person with all of you, we are very grateful to the GoToWebinar technology to bring us this virtual WEAAD event. The slide captures our WEAAD committee. I want to thank them for all the time that they have put in for this event. To start today's event, we will have a poll for you to answer, and I'm going to pass it along to Cynthia, another committee member. Next slide.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Stacy. Our first poll is designed to test your knowledge about cybercrimes. So I would like for you to please select all statements that are true. Security software will wholly prevent cybercrime. Links from familiar people, companies are 100% safe. It is not difficult to recover stolen money. And the other, I am too smart to be scammed, or none of the above. So we're about 30 seconds in. I'm going to give it about maybe 10 seconds or so. All right, a few more seconds. All right, so it looks like 69% of you have voted and responded. So these are the results, and 95% selected none of the above. And now I will be giving the floor to Carol Dupay, our other committee member, who will introduce our first speaker.
Good morning. My name is Carol Dupay, and I am excited to be here, and I'm very excited that we have got a well-known expert in the field with us today for our World Elder Abuse Day event. And that is Orange County Senior Deputy District Attorney for Cybercrimes, Mr. Rahul Gupta. Mr. Gupta specializes in prosecuting cybercrime in the Major Fraud Unit and is also the agency's body camera coordinator. Mr. Gupta has a background in technology and frequently teaches attorneys and law enforcement officers throughout California on digital evidence, social media, the dark web, and cryptocurrency. Again, I want to welcome you to today's WEAAD event, and I want to especially welcome Deputy District Attorney Gupta. Please turn on your microphone and camera and take it away.
Good morning, everyone. I hope you're having a fabulous day, and want to thank you all for joining us online. I know our original intent was to have this as a live presentation, so thank you for bearing with us and doing this in an online forum. So I'm going to talk about some things that are very pertinent for today in today's world. Obviously, cybercrime covers a lot of different areas, but I wanted to focus on things that may be affecting you right now as we speak today, especially as they relate to the COVID-19 crisis. Let me just check and see if okay, there we go. So some of the things that we're seeing that I wanted to make you aware of so that you can protect yourself and better protect yourself are phishing scams related to the COVID-19 crisis. Just some tips on how to stay safe on formats like this when you're speaking with people online, since we can't all gather together as we normally do. Just some tips to stay safe. Specifically about phone scams and phone phishing. Phone scams never seem to go away, and I'm going to play for you actually an audio recording speaking with a phone scammer, and then also conclude with just some cyber resources for those of you interested in learning more on how you can protect yourself. I wanted to leave you with some concrete resources. So as we start off, yes, I am a deputy district attorney and I'm an attorney, but I'm not your attorney. So nothing I say here is to be taken as any type of legal or financial advice, just some observations that I've made throughout my career. Just wanted to share with those with you. Oops. So what are we talking about? For many years now, within cybercrime prosecutions, we found that the elderly are most at risk. There's a number of reasons for this. One is significantly that most seniors and elders are at home, and so they are prime targets to be getting information and not being distracted by other things. Also, generally speaking, those of us that are older will have more financial assets. So cyber criminals will target those in the older age groups for those various reasons. And this is borne out not just by what we've seen in our trends, but by actual statistics. So these are cybercrime statistics by the FBI, and it is segmented the victims by age group. And as you can see, the total number of victims and the total number of loss or amount of loss is the greatest for those victims over the age of 60. In addition to that, why I'm bringing this to your attention here in California is because we are the #1 target for cyber criminals around the world. In California, we have the most number of cyber victims and we have the greatest amount of cyber loss. So it's very important for you to be cyber vigilant. Be aware of your surrounding circumstances and start really taking an appreciation for information that you're receiving through a text message, through a phone call, or through email. When people are surveyed about global risks and different countries and different governments are thinking about what is a concern for them, cyber attacks and data theft are at the top of the list. Okay, so this is not just a local problem, it's just not a national problem. This is really an international problem. And the individuals that are behind many of these cyber crimes are in jurisdictions that it's very difficult to identify them, it's difficult for us to prosecute them. So it is something that we just have to adapt to as a way of life and do a better job of protecting ourselves. And hopefully some of the suggestions I have here for you today will assist you in that endeavor. I'm a visual person, so I wanted to try and encapsulate for you what it's like in terms of the threats that we face. A few years ago, the percentage of cyber crimes that we'd be looking at was few and far between. But now when we look at cybercrime, it is an overwhelming, tidal wave of activity. Basically anything connected to the internet is a threat vector for cybercrime. So you think about how many devices each individual person has. I have 2 phones for work. I have a laptop and I have a tablet. So when you start thinking about that, you start to realize that cyber criminals have a lot of ways of reaching out to potential victims. And nowadays, everything in your house can be connected to the internet. Your fridge, your television, each one of those individually is an opportunity for a cyber criminal to try and get information from you and make you into a cyber victim. So it's very important for us to recognize that the internet is a fantastic thing, but there is some responsibility on our part to make sure that we stay safe. Oops, sorry. So what is it that cybercrime really is all about? Cybercrime is really about trust. Because these cyber criminals are contacting you through a text message, through a phone call, or through email, they have to pretend to be someone that you trust. Because at the end of the day, what they're after is some type of financial reward. That's either through personal information, which they can then use for alternate schemes, or they're looking for some actual compensation from you, money, in either as a gift card, as a credit card payment, or as a wire transfer. So how do they establish that trust? They establish that trust by pretending to either be someone that you're familiar with, that you trust, a loved one, a friend, or by representing an entity that you may trust, whether that's the Social Security Department, the IRS, the President of the United States, or Citibank, or Wells Fargo, or some institution that you trust or you've come to trust. So really, when we think about cybercrime, it is the criminal trying to establish trust with you over a text message, a phone call, or an email. So if we start thinking about ways in which we can question whether this is really the person they say they are, that's the first step in helping us protect ourselves from cyber criminals. Before we go on, we have another poll that we'd like you to take.
All right, so the second poll is older adults are often targets for cyber criminal because they usually have a nest egg and or regular monthly income. They are unaware of current scams. They are not necessarily tech savvy. They are more likely to respond to a sad story. And the last option is all of the above. So we'll give you a few seconds to answer the question. So it looks like about 40% of you have voted and responded. So if you have not yet, please submit your answer now before it closes. Oh. All right, so it looks like the majority of you have responded all of the above. And now I will hand the presentation back to Rahul.
Well, that's great. All of you can recognize that it is all of the above. So there's different ways to generate trust. So oftentimes when you are in need of some assistance, you reach out to those individuals that you trust. And right now we are suffering from one of the worst global pandemics we've ever faced, which is COVID-19. So when you're faced with a serious medical condition or medical threat, what do? You reach out to those that you trust, physicians, nurses, other resources in your community to get vital information that you need, because that can really affect your health and your safety and your well-being. Well, given that we're in this crisis, we know that this crisis is not affecting everyone equally. The CDC has put out, and we know from the studies and we know from the mortality rate, that unfortunately COVID-19 is disproportionately affecting those in the older community. So what that means is that makes it even more of an urgent sense of urgency for those individuals to get the necessary care they need, but also the necessary information they need. So urgency oftentimes will cause people to maybe not be as vigilant with information as they should be. And that is an opportunity for cyber criminals that they don't want to go to waste. It reminded me of a very famous phrase by an individual who used to be the mayor of Chicago. And he said, "You never let a serious crisis go to waste." And what I mean by that is it's an opportunity to do things you think you could not do before. And cyber criminals, this is basically their motto. Whenever there's a natural disaster, whenever there's a global pandemic, whenever there is some crisis, cyber criminals activate, because they know that individuals are in need of information, are in need of services, and they're going to go to the internet to find that. And unfortunately, cyber criminals try and take advantage of that opportunity, and they try not to let that crisis go to waste. We've seen just since January that the number of COVID-19 related scams online has increased tremendously. In fact, one of the leading cybercrime or cybersecurity publications estimated that there's been a 30,000% increase, 30,000% increase just since January, right? So again, this is a crisis. The cyber criminals don't want to let it go to waste. So they are actively trying to deceive you with fake information about this crisis because they know most people are going to go to the internet seeking out advice. And they're going to try and dupe you into clicking a link or responding to an email to either give up your personal information or to pay some type of monetary compensation. So let's talk about one of the oldest ways in which cyber criminals try and separate you from your money. It's called phishing. Phishing has evolved now to take on the terms to mean that it's when you get contacted either by an email, telephone, or a text message by someone who's pretending to be from a legitimate institution, like we talked about. It could be the IRS, could be Social Security, it could be the CDC, it could be the President of the United States. And they're going to try and dupe you into thinking that they are someone that you can trust to obtain from you either personal information or some type of monetary compensation. Most recently, there was a phishing email once COVID-19 started that was pretending to be from the White House, actually from the President of the United States. Now, when you look at this email, it looks as if it is a real email, that it was sent very recently to discuss some things going on as it relates to the IRS and tax payments. But if you were to click that link, right, especially in a time where people are waiting for stimulus money, you would get this next page. Now this page looks extremely official, and cyber criminals are very good at Photoshop, very good at pretending to be someone that they're not. Again, it looks like a page that you could trust. But if you were to click that download link, it would then install malware in your computer to steal information from you, both your personal passwords and banking information, and also your personal identifying information. So it is sometimes difficult to determine what is real and what is not real. So just some things that I've noticed over my career that I could pass on to you to help you be a little bit more observant. First of all, do you recognize who the email is being sent from? If you don't, that is something for you to cause, something in your mind that should make you think, maybe I shouldn't trust this email. How does the email start? Is it a general salutation, dear sir or madam? Right off the bat, then you know that this person is probably someone you don't know personally. So again, your guard should be up. Look for spelling and grammar errors. Oftentimes, cyber criminals are not very good with English. They may be in a foreign jurisdiction, and that's a telltale sign that this may not be a legitimate email. Does it have a download link or an attachment? Never download anything or click a link on an email that you're not 100% confident of. One thing that you can do is simply take your mouse and hover over the link, and a little window should pop up that will tell you where that link goes or what that attachment might contain. Right? And if all else fails, if you are expecting information from your bank, from your doctor, or from someone you trust, but the little hairs on the back of your head are sticking up, you're still not sure who this is, send them an email back saying, hey, I can't open what you've sent me. Can we talk on the phone? If they are in fact a scammer, the likelihood of them responding with a phone number is very low. But if it is someone that you know and trust, they might actually say, okay, give me a call. I also recommend this. Anytime that you get an alert from your bank or a financial institution asking you to respond immediately, don't respond right away with that email. Find the phone number on the back of your credit card and call the number, because you never know if that alert is in fact legitimate or not. But when you call them from the number that you know and the number that you trust, you can be assured that you're actually speaking to your own financial institution. So just be aware right now, there's a lot of COVID-19 related scams going on that are trying to get information from you and try and phish you. Now, to deal with this crisis, obviously we have to do social distancing, and we're trying to stay in as much as possible, especially where that's a recommendation for those in the older ages to help protect them from this crisis. So we're using more technology like we're using today. GoToWebinar, Zoom, Skype, FaceTime, to stay engaged with the people that we trust, the people that we love, or for work. But with this type of technology, we have to be aware that there are certain risks involved, and cyber criminals are using this technology to take advantage of those of us who are using it. So one of the ways in which they're doing that is simply by creating fake websites that sound similar to the application you might be using. So instead of Zoom, actually Zoom, their website is not zoom.com, it's actually zoom.us. So if you were to type in a different derivation of Zoom, you might actually get a fake website, or Skype, or GoToWebinar, one of these, because they're creating these fake websites to pretend like it's the one that you need to use to communicate. But in addition to that, what you have to realize is, as you can see here behind me, I just have a plain blank wall, because I took time to point my camera in a way that wouldn't reveal anything about me. What you need to know is when you're on a video chat type tool, what happens in the background can be just as revealing as what you tell someone. And so if you have personal information in your background, you may not want to reveal that to someone who you're talking to online. Also, on some of these online chat forums, someone may appear in a window that you don't even know, and that person may start to chat with you. Most of these, just like we have here today, have chat functions where they can send you messages. So someone that you don't know may appear in a window and start talking to you. You may believe that because they're in the chat that you were invited to, that that's a trusted person. But if you don't know all of the attendees, or it's very easy for someone to change their name in the window, it's not someone that you can automatically trust if you don't know them from a prior relationship. So be cautious of who you talk to on online chat forums and video forums, and what information that you share. Some other things that you can be aware of, always update these apps, especially if you're using it from your phone, because these video chat features oftentimes have cybersecurity weaknesses, and they have to update them continually to overcome those. So make sure that you're using the latest version of the app. Never share any personal information over these video conferences, not your username, your passwords, or anything like that, and don't share the link to your conference with other people that you don't know. Oftentimes they'll have a waiting room feature, which allows the host to see who's going to join and then let them in, and if there's someone the host doesn't recognize, don't let them in. And limit who you share your screen with. You don't want to give screen control over to other people, because they could post things that are not pertinent to your discussion. So basically, remember the same topics, or the same key takeaways. Don't share too much personal information over phone, email, or video conference, and also recognize that what's behind you could reveal some of that personal information that you don't want people to know if you're joining a forum where there's a lot of people. On this forum right now, it appears that we have 291 attendees. So obviously, I don't know everyone on this forum. I wouldn't want to reveal some personal information to those on this forum that I may not know. So just some things to be aware of as we use these new technologies. Now, phone scams. Phone scams have been around, I guess, ever since there's been phones, and they never seem to go away. And as I mentioned before, a lot of elderly people still have landlines, right? Most of the younger generation people, they only have mobile phones. Well, phone scammers don't have as much easy access to cell phone numbers as they do to landlines. Landlines, everyone still remembers there was a thing called a phone book. It did exist one day. And so numbers were published. And so it's very easy to get landline phone numbers. And those older adults who are at home during the day and have landlines are prime targets for cyber scammers and phishers. And so, just like with everything else, if you're interested in getting information about COVID-19, the phone scammers are there to try and take advantage of that. So be very wary of individuals calling you over the phone, trying to provide you information about COVID-19, but in general, provide you information about anything else. Again, you don't know who the other person is on the other line, so be very cautious about providing personal information, and especially don't make any type of payment over the phone of someone who's just calling you. Now, what I'd like to do for you today is give you a small snippet of a conversation I had with an actual phone scammer. The phone call was very long, and we talked about a lot of different things, but I wanted to give you a small snippet to try and give you an understanding of how these phone scammers work and how much money they can actually accumulate in a very small period of time, and give you some insight of what a phone scammer actually sounds like. So, if we could play that audio now, and I would just request all of you to adjust the audio on your own computer. We can't adjust that audio for you, so if it's a little bit low, you'll have to adjust that audio yourself. All right. So we're back. Okay, so okay, sorry. All right, sorry, we're back. All right, so that was just a small snippet. That conversation was a very long conversation. It almost went an hour, and we covered a lot of topics. So what prefaced that conversation was the fact that my wife got one of the scam phone calls, and it said it was from the IRS, and that she was delinquent, and that if she didn't pay an X amount of dollars, that she'd be arrested. So obviously, having the job that I do, I could not resist calling back, and that was the gentleman that happened to pick up. And so I thought it was fascinating to understand the volume of money coming in. You know, he estimated they had 300 people at the call center. They're making approximately $100,000 a day. Individuals are giving their retirement money, their 401k money. And it all comes down to this essential idea, which I thought he articulated so well. Obviously, I was pretending a lot to not know some of the information that he said, and he made this quote about people not being intelligent. And I wanted to press him on this. I said, oh, so you think people are dumb? And he said something that I had never really thought about in my 17 years of being a deputy district attorney. He said, no, people don't pay us. People aren't paying us because they're not smart. They're paying us because they're scared, because they trust the law. They trust the police, they respect the police, and they respect the law. And they don't want to get in trouble with the law, so they get scared, and that's why they pay. And so you can see this idea of trust. Because we have a civil society where we believe in law and order, and we believe in these institutions like the Social Security Department, our jury services, our IRS, if you do get a call like that, you feel a sense of urgency that says, oh my gosh, if I've done something wrong, I want to make amends, and what is it that I have to do to correct the situation, because I don't want to have to face some type of consequence for my error. And they take advantage of that. They take advantage of that idea of trust, of being from the IRS or the Social Security Department or from the CDC, or as we saw in that email, from the White House. And I wanted you to hear that because it's really a challenge for us. He estimated there were 20 of these call centers in India. Now, from my own research and knowledge, the Indian government is actually doing a pretty good job working with the FBI to try and crack these down. But India is not alone. These exist all over the world. North Korea, all over Russia. They're all over the world. And so these calls are coming in constantly to Americans. So law enforcement can't be everywhere at all times. So we have to educate our community in how to be more proactive. And you could hear right off the bat, the individual sounded like he had an accent. The call quality wasn't that good. And then he was demanding money. So understand something, that our institutions in the United States are not going to call you and demand money. The IRS is not going to call you demanding money. Social Security, the FBI, your jury services, these individuals are not going to call you. Also, the message that my wife got, it sounded like a robotic voice claiming to be from the IRS. It was obviously a fake, or I could determine it was a fake, but some people may not be able to do that, right? And so, you know, just some tips on phone scammers. Don't answer calls from numbers that you don't recognize. Never give your personal information over the phone. Like I said, institutions that you trust and that are here to protect you are not going to demand money over the phone. And just one thing that we've found time and time and time again, these scammers will ask for payment in gift cards. Okay, the IRS, Social Security, FBI, your local police department is never, one, going to ask for payment over the phone, and number two, will never ask for payment in a gift card. If anyone asks you for a payment of a gift card over the phone, you know it is a scam right away. And the other way you know that there's a scam is they are going to try and create a sense of urgency to build your trust right away. For example, someone is injured. One of your relatives is injured, or someone has been arrested and they need money right away. You are delinquent on a payment and you need to pay that, or you'll be arrested right away. They're always going to try and create a sense of urgency. And you should know by now that living in the United States, that government doesn't always work as fast as we want. And so if there is a sense of urgency being created, take a step back and say, wait a second. If the IRS was really looking for a payment, I would have received a letter. And I would have received 2 or 3 letters before it would get to the point where someone was calling me. So think about that and take a step back. A sense of urgency is a way for them to build trust and try and take advantage of you. So just be aware of that with phone scams. So overall, your personal information is extremely valuable. Cyber criminals can just use your personal information to open accounts, to use it to create fake identities, and to do whatever. So don't just think that if you haven't given over any money, that you haven't given over something valuable. Your identity, your personal identifying information is extremely valuable to cyber criminals. So please share that, or please don't share that without really understanding who's on the other side of that phone call, that text message, or that email. All right? And when in doubt, throw it out. If you think that there's something suspicious, there used to be this old phrase, if it's too good to be true, it probably is. Well, if you have any suspicions about an email or a phone call or a text message, do not send that personal information. Do not send any type of money. I'll give you an example. I just had this occur with me. I was engaging in a financial transaction or just trying to get an estimate on something. And the individual said, hey, text me some personal information so I can do a better job of giving you an estimate. And I said, you know what? I don't feel comfortable texting this to you. I'll pick up the phone and I'll call you and I can provide that so you can give me a better estimate. Because you just never know who is on the other end of that text message, right? Something else to be aware of is, share with care, right? When you post something online, know that you're posting that and that stays forever. So oftentimes, you might be excited about something that's happened in your life and you want to share that with your friends. That may reveal some personal information about you. For example, you just standing in front of your house. Let's say you have a beautiful garden or you did some new landscaping. You stand in front of your house and it shows your address. Well, you've revealed to the world where it is you live. And if I look at your social media and I look at some other things on Facebook, I might be able to determine a lot more about you, and some cyber criminal may decide to target you that way. So try and limit the amount of personal information that you post online, and remember that stays there forever. So just be cautious and be a little bit more protective of your personal information, because like I said, your personal information is just as valuable as money. So think about that. Now, in this world of fake news, it's sometimes hard to understand or realize where do I go for that information. So just know that those institutions that you do trust are there to help you as well. So the FBI website right now has a lot of really good information on COVID-19 scams and how to stay vigilant. Also, there's a website called USA.gov, and you can see actually in this website up above, it says it's an official website of the United States government. I'm starting to see that a lot more on official U.S. Government websites. So that's one small indication to know whether or not this is a safe website. But again, fraudsters can fake that as well. So you have to take some time to look at some of these websites and understand that whether or not they are real and accurate. Federal Trade Commission has some really good information about how to stay safe online. And here locally, there's a lot of local resources here to support you. Obviously, the Orange County District Attorney's Office. The Orange County Sheriff's Department is the only police agency in Orange County that has 2 full-time deputies dedicated to cybercrime. So if you're fortunate enough to live in a jurisdiction that is patrolled by the Orange County Sheriffs, you should feel very fortunate because they have 2 active deputies that are really there to service your needs. At the end of the day, when it comes down to cybercrime, the FBI is really the main resource because they can take a national view of crime and they have the ability to reach out to foreign jurisdictions greater than any local jurisdiction can. So IC3.gov is the central repository for reporting cybercrimes. So in addition to calling your local police agency, please always report a cybercrime to IC3.gov because the FBI can aggregate cybercrimes across the United States. If you get a fake email and you think you're the only one and you responded to it and you feel embarrassed that you don't want to say, well, guess what? That email may have went to thousands and millions of people across the United States. And if you don't let the FBI know, they may not see that as a threat or a major priority for them. But if everyone responded, they would see that it's affecting everyone nationwide, and they can put their services behind that. So it's always important to report cybercrime, not just to your local agency, but to the FBI as well. So those are just some of the trends that we're seeing right now during the COVID-19 crisis. And I just wanted to pass along some observations to help you feel a little bit more safe. But as always, we really need to have a paradigm shift in the way that we think about cybercrime. When you get an email, a text message, or a phone call, always just be thinking in the back of your head, is this person that I'm communicating with really that person? In the same way we've taught children from the day that they were born, when you get to the intersection, look both ways before you cross. When you get information in a digital format, either text message, phone call, or through email, think twice before you provide personal information or any type of monetary compensation, because you never know who's on the other side of that line, because they're trying to build trust with you. But if you don't trust them, you can always be safe and be a little bit suspicious of who that person is and ask a few questions. And like that slide said, when in doubt, throw it out. So these were just some of the things that I wanted to talk about today, and I want to wish you all to have a great day today and celebrate what we're all here for, and be aware that those in the elder community are the most vulnerable when it comes to cybercrime. So if you learn about some good information, pass that on to those in your family or your friends that are older that may not have all that information, to help keep them aware of what cybercrimes are out there. And I think we have some time for some question and answers.
Thank you, Raul. At this time, we're going to ask questions from the attendees. Our first question comes from Judy Osuna. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. And she's asking, she's saying she takes calls all day from unknown numbers. Can they capture information just from answering?
Generally speaking, no, they won't get any information just by speaking to you. However, oftentimes what these cyber criminals do is, in addition to getting phone lists, then they will share the lists of those individuals that actually pick up. And so you're not necessarily sharing personal information by accepting that call, but they are definitely keeping track of those individuals that are actually picking up the call, and you probably will actually get more calls because of that.
Okay, thank you for that. And our next question comes from Irene Chu, and she's asking, how can she know if a website or a link she got from a friend is safe?
Okay, well, that's a great question. It's very difficult oftentimes to know, but let's take that in two ways. If it's a new website that you're going to, one thing that you can do is you can just Google that name of that website and then put the word scam after it and see, or fake, and see if there's anyone else out there who's identified this as a scam or a fake. If it's a friend, what you can do is first contact that friend and say, hey, where did you get this link from, or what is this about? I can tell you in my own personal experience how many times a friend of mine or a family member has just forwarded something to me that is a scam. They didn't even read it. I just got one the other day. It was a discount at a restaurant, I believe. And it said, if you purchase this up front, you get this amount of credit. And I opened it, and it was clearly a scam, and I said to my friend, hey, this is a scam. And he said, oh, I didn't even open it. It looked like a good deal, so I wanted to share it with all of you. And so oftentimes your friends, they have the best of intentions, and they're trying to help you get good information. But the best way to find out if something has been forwarded to you is just call your friend back and say, hey, what is it you know about this? Because I trust you, I would normally trust what you send, but in the digital world, a lot of times people don't even read what they're sending you. So just call your friend and ask. Okay,
thank you so much for that. And we have another question from Bill Sive. I hope I'm saying that right. And they're asking if there have been documented cybercrimes related to artificial intelligence?
Oh, that one I am not 100% sure of. Artificial intelligence is evolving so fast and so rapidly, it's often hard to keep up with all of the advances. But what I would say to you is robocalls are a type of artificial intelligence. And what I mean by that is a robocall is that the computer is fed thousands of numbers in the United States, and the computer dials those numbers and plays a recorded call for you. So in a way, that's a type of artificial intelligence, and that has led to tremendous cybercrime. So I would say yes, from a primitive standpoint, there is some artificial intelligence that has led to cybercrime, but in terms of what you're probably thinking, which is a large-scale attack, I'm not aware of that as of yet, but you know, with technology, anything is possible. But again, at the end of the day, that artificial intelligence is going to try and build trust with you in a very short amount of time. And remember, you control that. You don't have to respond, you don't have to click, and you can hang up the phone to be safe.
Thank you. And our last question is, how do scammers get my email address or phone number?
Okay, well, unfortunately, this is where no matter how safe you are, you're really at risk because of all the big companies in the United States. You can go down the list: Experian, Equifax, Kaiser, Anthem, Yahoo. If you've registered your email with one of these companies and they get hacked, then your email is now exposed to the cyber criminals. And unfortunately, there are millions upon millions of emails out there for hackers to access. So unfortunately, they have access to that. That's why changing your password on a regular basis, having a very strong password, is very important. And that's also why using the same password for many different accounts is a bad idea. Because if one of those companies gets hacked, that username and password is now in the hands of the cyber criminals. So if you use the same password for your Wells Fargo that you do for your Netflix account, if Netflix gets hacked, then that username and password someone could use to try and get into your Wells Fargo account. So I know it's very cumbersome to have different emails and different passwords, but it really is for your benefit. And phone numbers, like I said before, phone numbers have been listed for years, landlines. It's much harder for cyber criminals to get your cell phone numbers. So that's why you see a lot less phone calls on your cell phone than you do on your landline. But now it's the same thing though, right? I know when you go to the dry cleaners, they ask me for my phone number because that's how they look up my account. Same thing. If the dry cleaner gets hacked, now the phone number and the name associated with that is out there with the cyber criminals. So unfortunately, our personal identifying information is being used by companies and businesses to identify us, for them to give us better service. But the downside for that is if they're not careful with our information, it gets in the hands of the cyber criminals, and then we can be victimized.
Wow. Yeah, it makes it very difficult, but it sounds like it's just important to be vigilant.
It really is. And what I would leave you with is this. If you were walking down a dark alley late at night and you heard a noise, your instincts would say, hey, there might be something around the corner. But when you're sitting in the luxury of your home, watching television and scrolling through emails, you don't feel a sense of urgency. You don't feel that something is at risk. And that's the hardest part about cybercrime, is that you're often interacting with a cyber criminal in the safety of your own home, so you feel more safe. And all I can tell you is you have to try and overcome that and just think, if someone I don't know is contacting me by phone, text message, or email, I automatically have to think twice before I even respond, and definitely before I share personal information or any type of money.
Thank you, Raul. It was very informative. Thank you so much. And at this time, I'm going to hand it over to Cynthia, our other committee member. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Maika, and thank you, Rahul, for that great presentation. So with the onset of COVID-19, we've seen a number of virus-related scams. as with all scams, most of the COVID-19 scams revolve around some sort of deceit or misinformation. So we will be giving a couple more polls, and our next two polls are true-false questions that are designed to get you thinking about how to distinguish fact from fiction and how acting on bad information might affect you. So the first poll, we'd like for you to answer true or false. I can always trust information received from a person or company familiar to me. So we're collecting responses, and you guys looks like you are all getting your entries in. So if you have not yet, please respond true or false. And we'll be closing the poll in about 10 seconds. All right, so we'll close the poll now, get the results shared, and 97, majority of you have responded false. And I will be sharing the fourth poll. The fourth poll, again, is another true or false question. So misinformation makes me more vulnerable to exploitation. Please answer true or false. All right, so we'll leave it open for another 10 seconds or so. All right, so we'll close the poll and show results. And 96% answered true, and that is correct. So I will give the floor again to Carol Dupay, who will introduce our next speaker.
Hello again. This is Carol Dupay, and you know what, seriously, my head is truly just swimming with all of this new information on cybercrime. And it really is a little scary. My guess is that probably just about everybody has had some experience with a scam in one way or another, which is very, very sad. I want to remind you all that there are handouts that are attached to this webinar, and you can download these and print them out or save them in any way that you'd like. We are very fortunate that we've got such good speakers. And again, thank you so much, Mr. Gupta, for this really interesting and informative information on cybercrime. I am always glad and happy to be able to introduce Dr. Trin, who is our next presenter. And Dr. Trin is going to be talking today about some of the myths and realities, some of the facts and fictions of COVID-19. And this is particularly tricky, as you all know, because we're learning new things literally every day, almost like by the hour. So Dr. Trin is going to be giving us a little bit of information about some of the facts and fiction of COVID-19, particularly as it has to do with the older adult population. If you have questions for Dr. Trin, don't forget, you can go ahead and just put your questions right in the question box. And I think that Dr. Trin is going to try to answer your questions just during his presentation. Dr. Trin is the Chief Medical Officer for Irvine Research. He is on the board of directors for Alzheimer's Orange County, and truly, among many other things, he is also a medical missionary with Tongue Out Medical Missions. Dr. Trin is a gifted researcher and a lecturer, and one of the things that he has learned is the value of both listening and laughing with his patients. Welcome, Dr. Trin, turn on your mic and your camera and take it away.
All right, thank you. Let me, hey everyone, can you guys hear me okay? You are welcome to type in your questions in the questions box or your comments. I have that box open, so I will be able to see it as I am speaking here for you guys. So, so I want to make sure that I'm going to address the concerns you have as I'm speaking. So this is a interesting topic, facts versus fiction about COVID. And it's an interesting topic because, as you may or may not know, the facts kind of change every day, doesn't it? And not just for you, but for physicians as well. I was just reading this morning that the FDA just revoked their approval for Plaquenil, which is hydroxychloroquine. That's the malaria medication for the treatment of coronavirus or COVID-19. They had approved it a number of weeks ago, and that have just been revoked, right? So again, the facts change quite frequently. I chuckled a little bit at one of the poll questions. Let me pull it up here. The poll question that was asked, the poll number 3 right now is, I can always trust information received from a person or company familiar with me. And and I think the biggest question is do you trust the information received from the government itself? Do you trust the information received from the CDC, the World Health Information, the World Health Organization, the Orange County Public Health? And I've been looking on Facebook lately, and there's like 2 groups of folks, right? One group of folks are essentially waiting for the next recommendation from the World Health Organization, from the CDC, from the Orange County Public Health. And if you don't already know, the Orange County Public Health just dropped their recommendation or mandate that that everyone should wear a mask in public. That kind of caught me off guard. Because the CDC said everyone, the CDC says and World Health Organization says, mask in public is something that is certainly recommended and important. And then we have our Orange County Health Department drop that as a mandate that folks should be wearing a mask in public. So talk about confusion, guys. Talk about confusion that comes every day. And then in the midst of all this, there's politics. There are folks who believe that that this pandemic and everything that's happening is because November 7th is coming, and there's a scheme behind it. And so you got this, you got riots, you got the protests, and you got an election coming. Who do you believe and what do you believe, right? And so let me first tell you and talk to you about face mask, okay? And let me show you, first of all, the numbers in Orange County. Do you guys want to see the numbers in Orange County of hospitalizations and ICU admissions? I get that data almost every day. And so let me pull up for you that data so that you can see what's going on in Orange County here with that. So this is kind of like the person who's not IT techie, right? Rather than showing you what's on the screen, I will show you what's on my iPhone. Everyone can see that, right? It's almost as good as the screen, guys. So this is the daily. This is the daily hospital admission rate, which is in orange, and then in blue is the daily ICU beds that are taken up. And so you see a curve that goes like this, right? What I can tell you guys is that, yes, we are opening up society. Yes, folks need to go back to work because many folks are on their, their final paycheck, or they haven't received, their unemployment check, or their bank account is approaching zero. Yes, folks need to have to go back to work. But if you saw that chart, guys, the number of admissions to the ICU have doubled in the last few weeks. We have doubled ICU admissions because of coronavirus. Now, there are some folks who are less concerned with the absolute number. They say, 150 something ICU beds isn't a lot because there's 3 million folks in Orange County, looking at the absolute number, so they're less concerned with it. But let me tell you something. I think there's only about 600 or 700 ICU beds in Orange County total. There's 600 to 700 ICU beds in Orange County total, and COVID has taken up 1 out of 5 beds already, guys, and that's doubled in the last few weeks. So, is face mask important when you're out in public? All right. Can you guys see me and hear me real quick? Because I got a comment here.
No, you're doing great. You're doing great. We can see you and hear you.
Doing good? Okay, good. So is face mask important? Yes, wear it when you're out in public. Just because the Orange County Health Department says it's not mandatory, I am telling you, you will save your own life. Wear it when you're out in public. I am really upset, actually, at the recent drop in the mandate of face masks in public. It just makes no sense to me. But I understand the other argument about liberty and rights, and the rights to wear face masks versus not wear face masks. So there's an argument on the other side. But from the argument of your life and for your own health and the safety of both you, your family, and those you come in contact with, right? Face masks are very important when you're out, especially when you're out shopping, when you're out in areas where there are other folks and things of that sort. Okay. Cool. So you guys can hear me. All right. And let me see. Melissa says, Dr. T, what's the deal with PPE these days? Do our OC hospitals have enough? So Melissa, I can tell you that the Memorial Care hospitals, which is Orange Coast Memorial, Saddleback Memorial, yes, we do have enough. As far as when I'm in the ER every week, I have what I need, so that's good. Now, does it mean that doctors and nurses won't accept your donations? They'll take it if you have masks and shields to donate, because although we have enough, there's always that fear. And I do know doctors who's especially I think with certain hospital systems who are less, they have less than other hospital systems, let's just say that. But they'll gladly take donations if you guys have that. Election day is November 3rd, yes. Did I say November 7th? I'm a bad citizen. And Audrey says, I'm 67, underlying conditions. Is it safe to visit the dentist for regular cleaning? So, Audrey, as long as your dentist is taking the appropriate precautions, they're wearing their shield, they're wearing their mask, and they're taking the appropriate precaution, then yes, I know dentists who are still seeing patients every day, and they have their masks, they have their N95 masks, they have their shields, and so yes, super important for that. And I got a question here. There are members in the LGBTQ community that are immunocompromised. Are medical facilities prevented from collecting data as it relates to the community long-term survivors of HIV, transgender, and data that includes that? That's a good question, Bill. I don't know if the medical community specifically collect information specific to that group. They may, or they may not. I don't know the details with that, but I totally understand your point with the fact that some of them may be immunocompromised, especially if they have HIV and AIDS. And as a matter of fact, guys, if anyone who is immunocompromised, whether you have an autoimmune condition, chronic conditions, take extra precaution. I know that a huge number of the hospital admissions for COVID are from patients who live in assisted facilities, living facilities, and nursing homes. We need to do everything we can, guys, to protect our seniors, right? To protect you guys. And so extra precaution needs to be done to protect those who live in nursing homes and assisted living facilities and boarding cares. As a matter of fact, I would minimize foot traffic in and out, especially during this COVID seasons. And I would certainly recommend that if families wanted to visit, try to consider using like Zoom or FaceTime or Messenger video. Try to consider, ask your nursing home, ask your assisted living facilities to set up little Zoom stations where those who, where parents and grandparents who live in there can Zoom with their children. Ask them to set that up would be my recommendation, because safety is more important right now than anything else with that. Question here, if someone has recovered from COVID, can they become reinfected? Is there new research out here about reinfection of COVID? So can you be infected twice? That is a great question. We're actually conducting and looking at that data. I know, William, that in Korea, they have published a report of patients who tested positive twice, right? So they tested positive once they had COVID, and then they cleared from it, and then some point later they tested positive again, right? This is in Korea where this study was published. And so here's something interesting that they found. The patients who tested positive the second time, what they tested positive for was fragments of the virus that was still shedding from what they hypothesized or what they believe was the original virus, but the shedding was so slow, and it was fragments of the original virus that was still shedding over time, that they caught those fragments the second time and tested positive the second time. Those patients were actually not sick the second time. They didn't have the flu again the second time. They didn't have, the cough and the shortness of breath again for the second time. The symptoms weren't there, but the testing was positive, and it was fragments of the virus. So that was one study out of Korea that we saw. Will things change over time as we get more data? Yes, things may change. I'm just telling you of the most recent one that I've seen and read was that yes, patients can get tested positive twice, but it doesn't mean you'll have the same symptoms again the second time. I hope that helps with that. Any updates on vaccines from Jeff? Yes, we do have updates. We have a number of pharmaceutical companies in stage phase 2 clinical trials right now. And I believe in the next few months, these clinical trials, some of them will move on to phase 3. If you guys don't know clinical trials, they go in phases, right? So a clinical trial is when you put a medication or a vaccine through this pipeline and you test it for the FDA, right? They go through phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3. And you gotta pass through phase 1 successfully. Phase 1 normally looks for safety, right? They normally make sure that nobody drops dead all of a sudden, that you don't grow a third eye or tail. That's phase 1. If you pass through phase 1, then you move on to phase 2. Phase 2 continues to look at safety, but phase 2 also looks at dosages, right? What is the best dose for this medication? Is it 100 milligram? Is it 1,000 milligram? Is it 10 milligram, right? What dose works? That's in phase 2, guys. And they continue to look at safety, right, and collect safety data. If they pass through phase 2, it means they figured out, the dosage that works the best, right? Maybe it's 10 milligrams, 20 milligrams. What dosage of vaccine works the best to take care of this virus, right? That's phase 2. And then you move on to phase 3. Phase 3 is when you take those dosages that work the best, you continue to collect safety data, and phase 3 is when you expand it to a whole bunch of patients. It could be hundreds, it could be thousands of patients, and if it works in phase 3, then they submit it to the FDA for approval, right? That's clinical trials. I'm in the clinical trial industry. I do clinical trials for Alzheimer's, right? So we're looking for medications to address Alzheimer's, and so we do consultations and all that, no cost for that. So as far as clinical trials on vaccinations, most and many are in phase 1 and phase 2. Through the second half of the year, some will make it to phase 3. If they make it to phase 3 and they're successful, guys, then probably sometime, maybe in the first half of the year, one of them may reach FDA approval. So you're looking at 2021, sometime next year is what I'm saying, where we will have someone that will get to some vaccine that will get to clinical trials. Okay, that's where we are at clinical trials right now. All right, you guys have a lot of questions here. Kim Pham says, can asymptomatic persons get tested for COVID? And if yes, then where? So Kim, I know that in Los Angeles, they are testing for COVID for Los Angeles residents for free. I don't know if there's a site in Orange County where you can drive up and get tested for free. I know that if your doctor ordered it and it's part of your medical group and your medical clinic, or it's ordered in the ER, then I believe that's covered as long as it's ordered by the doctor. But you've seen those, or you've heard about those drive-through COVID testing, right? All you have to do is do a Google search. And you go in there and you type drive-through COVID testing in Orange County. And you'll get probably a list of sites. Now, the thing with the drive-through, guys, is that I don't believe it's free. I believe that there's a charge for it. I know that Westminster Mall have been doing it on the weekends. I think down south in South Orange County, they're doing it as well. I think, yeah, there are a number of locations. Do a Google search, drive-through COVID testing, Orange County. And they'll probably, a few will pop up. And you may want to give them a call to verify and all that, all right? But they do charge, I believe, if you're doing the drive-throughs, okay? And that's where you can get the asymptomatic, I believe. Let's see. Susan says, is it a good idea to wear both a mask and a shield since so many people don't wear a mask? So should you wear a mask and a shield? So good question. I think I've seen some folks do that. Can you do that? Yes, you can do that. Do you have to do that? I think overall, unless you're in an environment where you're around like a ton of people all the time. Nobody's respecting the 6 feet distancing rule. I wouldn't worry so much about the shield aspect of it. I know that doctors will wear shields in the hospital with a mask if they're doing a surgical procedure, right? If they're intubating someone, or looking through your throat, trying to do a swab and things of that sort, that's when they would consider doing a mask and a shield. Do the public have to do that? No, I don't think you have to do that. It doesn't mean you can't do it, unless you are like exposed to a whole bunch of people all the time in front of you, right? Cindy says, are insurance company obligated to pay for COVID antibody testing under care, even if they are not participating? So Cindy, the first thing you should know is that I believe there's maybe just one antibody that's FDA approved right now. It's either 0 to 1. I believe I read somewhere the other day that the FDA may have approved one antibody testing. Other antibody testings are not FDA approved right now. With that, we have a lot of concerns with antibody testing, guys. And the concern I have is this. First of all, you should know the difference between the swab, the throat swab or the nasal swab versus the antibody testing, okay? You should know the difference. For those of you guys who don't know the difference, this is it. If you do the swab, right? If you get a little swab and you swab the back of my throat or up my nose, what you're looking for is that you're looking for the actual virus particles, right? The actual virus itself. You're looking for active infection, right? Do you have the virus now? And we can see that on the swab. If you look for the antibody, and that's we call it serology, we call it the immunology test or the antibody test. That's a finger stick, right? That's a little finger stick, kind of like the little blood sugar finger stick if you're a diabetic, right? And so we are looking for the antibody, which means we are looking for exposure to the virus. It does not tell you if you have the virus today. It only tells you if you've been exposed to it. So do you guys know the difference? Exposure versus active infection. The finger stick will not tell you active infection. It's only going to tell you if you have the antibody. Now, there's 2 types of antibodies. There's an antibody called IgM antibody, and there's a second antibody called IgG antibody, okay? Let me tell you the difference. The IgM antibody looks for the acute infection, the infection that it tells you if you've been exposed to it over the last 3 to 4 weeks. That's when the IgM antibody goes up, okay? The last 3 to 4 weeks of exposure, okay? Now, after about 4 weeks or so, what's going to happen is this, guys. After about 4 weeks, the IgM level goes down and your IgG antibody level goes up. And the IgG level stays up for a few months at least, okay, for a long time. So the IgG level, if you're positive, tells me that you've been infected, several months ago. How many months ago exactly? We actually don't know yet because this is a new virus, but IgG normally tells us long-term exposure, several months ago. The IgM antibody tells me if you've been exposed just in the last few weeks. Does that make sense, guys? Right? The antibody level does not tell you if you're actively infected. It only tells you if you've been exposed. Here's the other thing you should know about the antibody test. If you were exposed today by the virus, if you got infected today with the virus, it takes about 5 days for your body to build enough IgM antibody to be detected in the blood. So the first 5 days, guys, your antibody levels will be negative. You will get a negative serology test. So that is a false negative. in the first 5 days of the infection. Does that make sense? Which is why you can't rely on these tests, guys. If you were infected the first 5 days, it won't tell you. You can't see anything from that, right? You got to be infected for, you know, at least a week or more than a week before the antibody test will show up. So that is the difference between the swab and the antibody test. Okay. Jeffrey says, does the antibody test confirm you were exposed to COVID-19? Yes, it confirms you're exposed to COVID-19 and not the flu. It's specific to that. Bitnup says, is it safe for essential workers to go home and share meals and room with their household members? Well, it depends on how protected you are when you're out there working, right? If, for example, I'm a physician, right? When I go home from the ER, I make sure my shoes are not all over the living room, right? My shoe stays at the front door. I make sure I go straight to the restroom and wash my hands, okay? Sometimes if I'm wearing scrubs and stuff, I make sure that that clothes goes off and straight to the laundry. So that's kind of the protection I do when I come home. And because I'm more exposed, because I work in the ER once a week, and I'm exposed to patients, that's kind of like my rule. And so it depends on your workspace. It depends on your exposure when you're working. I would recommend when you first come home, guys, go straight to the restroom and wash your hands. That's step number one. And make sure you don't drag your shoes all over the house, okay? With that. All right. Maribel says, I have a friend who went to get tested for COVID and was later notified that the person performing her test was positive. Is there any regulation for these testing centers or for staff who are coming to work? Wow, that's kind of scary, Maribel. So, and that's not surprising. It's, you know, if you're working as a healthcare professional, your risk for catching COVID is going to be higher than the risk of somebody who's not a healthcare professional. So scary, but not surprising. Maribel, I can only speak for the institutions I work with. When I go to the hospital, yes, my temperature is checked all the time. When I go to my office, yes, my temperature is checked all the time. And there are a set of questions that I need to answer every time I show up. Do I have a fever? Do I have a cough, right? And have I been in contact with somebody else who is COVID positive? So I have to answer those questions. So yes, we have these regulations, at least for the locations where I work, right? I can't speak for anyone else with that. Sharon says, is it advised to stay at home for the remainder of the year? Well, Sharon, it all depends, Sharon, on if you're on your last, paycheck or what your bank account looks like. I know a lot of folks who need to go back to work because their bank account is approaching zero. They can't stay at home, and they're probably the folks who are doing everything they can to go back to work. And I can completely understand that and sympathize with that. So here's my thing. Here's my thought on that. If you can work from home and still get the work done from home from a laptop, right, from your computer, then yes, it's probably safer to stay at home. If you are an essential worker and you need to be at work to keep the economy going, to keep the banks open, right? Imagine about all your banks tellers stayed at home. You can't get to the bank, right? If you work in that type of industry where you're an essential worker, then definitely, go to work, but keep your 6 feet distancing rule, social distancing, wear masks when appropriate, and wash your hands, and do all the appropriate things that we all know about, right? With that. Let's see here. Okay. Let me look here. Jody says, I read that there's a petition circulating asking Disney to not open in July because of the spike in cases. I feel there's a backlash brewing and I support it. I believe masks should be required. I believe in you, Dr. Fossey. Oh, thanks, Jody, for believing in me. You should probably believe Dr. Fossey a little bit higher. Fossey, is it? At the CDC higher than you believe in me, but I appreciate that. There is a backlash. I was just really disappointed, guys, that we dropped the mandate to wear a mask in public, because it just doesn't make sense to me, guys. I mean, we're opening our society. People are going back to work. They're going back to restaurants. Gyms are opening up. And then you saw my graph, right? The ICU beds for COVID has doubled in the last, few weeks. And at the same time, we dropped our mandate to wear a mask. It just doesn't make any science sense to me. But anyway, who am I, right? And there's a question that says, Marcia says, if a person is still shedding, are they still contagious to others? So Marcia, the way we look at contagiousness is we do a second swab, especially in the hospital, right? If we swab you and you're positive and you have COVID, and then you get treated, and one of the recommendations of when you're clear from COVID is when we swab you again. Normally it's 2 swabs in 2 days was what we use. If we swab you twice and you're negative twice, it's when you're officially cleared from COVID with that. So I hope that helps. If you're still shedding and you're shedding the actual virus, yes, you're contagious. Okay. What is the age range for patients in ICU? Amber, the older the patients, the higher the likelihood of ICU admission. The older the patient, the higher the likelihood of ICU admission from COVID. So as we get older, it has everything to do with, having maybe an immune system that wasn't as good as when you were in your 20s and 30s, or maybe having chronic medical conditions, or maybe having conditions that, have affected your lungs, emphysema, asthma, right? COPD, a lot of lung conditions. Those patients are at higher risk, obviously, for COVID because COVID attacks the lungs, right? And causes this viral pneumonia with that. And I'm just going to go as fast as I can, guys, in the time we have going through all your questions here. And so Shelly, in your medical opinion, do you think all staff and residents of long-term care facilities should be tested, whether it's a positive case or not, and should continue to be tested? My thoughts, Shelly, is currently they are screening most long-term facilities. They are checking temperatures of everyone who walks through the door. They're checking temperatures of every employee who comes to work every morning. They have the list of questions, right, that are being asked. Do you have a fever? Do you have all the symptoms of COVID or not? Have you been exposed? So those are the basic things that should be done. The question is, should we do additional testing? Should we swab the employees? Should we do, should we check their finger stick and look for immunology for employees? I know the rules are changing all the time. I don't think it's a bad idea to check your employees who are in front of patients every day. So the question is, how often do you check, right? Obviously it doesn't make sense to swab them every day. That doesn't make sense. But do you swab them once a week? Do you swab them every 2 weeks? Do you swab them once a month? And we don't have an answer to that yet, Shelly, of how frequent we should check. And here's the other thing I have a concern with when you're swabbing or checking for COVID, right? So here I am, I come in, I do a finger stick or I do a swab, and guess what? It's negative. It's negative. I'm so excited that I don't have COVID, right? It's negative. And guess what, guys? It doesn't mean that I can't catch it tomorrow. Negative today means nothing tomorrow, right? I can walk in and be exposed to it tomorrow and catch it. So I don't want you to have this false sense of security, or I don't want you to let your guard down just because you went and you tested negative, because it means nothing 6 hours from now if you were exposed to somebody coughing at you 6 hours from now. Does that make sense, guys? Yes, it's important to consider testing. We should test to see how many people in the community already have it, right? We need that information for epidemiology. We need that information to learn about herd immunity and all that, right? But don't let your guard down just because you're negative today, right? Just because you're negative today with that. Susan says, what percentage of those infected with serious symptoms do not have a fever? Is testing the pulse ox as more or as important? So I believe the last time I looked at the data, the fever does occur. It's one of the most common symptoms. I would say probably up to about 70% or so, somewhere in that range, guys. Our patients do have a fever as one of their first symptoms with that. The fever normally will occur before your oxygen level drops, right? So she's asking about the pulse ox, that little machine, guys, that you put your finger in and tells you, what your oxygen level is. Is it high? Is it low? When should you worry, right? Our oxygen level, guys, our normal oxygen level should be, at least in the mid-90s or higher. If you drop down to a 90 or below, or the low 90s or below, right, that's kind of concerning unless you already have underlying lung conditions that explain it. But the oxygen level dropping comes later, after the infection has gotten to your lungs and has caused, all this damage to your lung. Do you guys know why the oxygen level drops? Do you guys know why the oxygen level drops? Type in yes or no in the comment question section. Do you guys know why the oxygen level drops with that? Why that's so important? And it's important because we actually look at the oxygen level to determine if patients should be admitted to the hospital from coronavirus with that. And let me share with you real quick. Let me share with you, Audrey says no. Let me share with you real quick on why and how coronavirus kills, okay? How coronavirus kills a patient. Holy moly, there's so many no's here. I got like one yes from Gary, awesome. Okay, so I need to answer this question. Why does your oxygen level drop, okay? After you hear my reasoning today, after you hear, is it just, Gisela says, is it your lungs collapse? Not really. The lung collapse is a rare thing. So the way coronavirus kills a patient is this. Your immune system is trying to attack the virus, right? Your immune system is trying to attack this virus. It's trying to defend itself against the virus. And if you understand the theory behind inflammation, okay? If you understand the theory behind inflammation, inflammation is this. So let's say you're walking on the beach and you step on a nail, right? And you step on a nail. So God forbid that happens, right? You walk on the beach and you step on a nail. What happens, guys? What happens? And type this in the chat box. What happens to that area around the wound in a matter of minutes? What happens to the area around the wound in a matter of minutes? Right? Type in the chat box. What happens to the area in the wound in a matter of minutes when you walk in? Okay, that area, right? That area around the wound gets swollen. That area around the wound, right? It gets red. Right? It gets red. That area around the wound gets painful. So what's happening is, guys, is anytime a foreign object that gets into the skin, like stepping on a nail, right, occurs, inflammation happens. Inflammation happens. The immune system is attacking that area, and as the immune system attacks that area, fluid, right? Fluid goes inside, inflammation and debris goes inside and causes swelling. It is like a pool of debris. That's inflammation, right? A pool of debris, and everything goes in there, and that is the consequence of your immune system, right? Going to an area to fight any bad guys so far, right? It puffs up and turns white. That's right, inflammation. So does everyone understand inflammation so far? Inflammation is when your immune system is attacking anything it doesn't like, anything foreign, right? Fluid goes to it, swelling goes to it, and everything. There's a big battle is what it is, right? Now, I want you to take all that inflammation, right, in the foot where the nail was stepped on. I want you to take all that inflammation and bring it to the lungs, because that's what happens. When coronavirus is in your lungs, attacking your lungs, right, your immune system is attacking the virus, and during this attack, all this inflammation fluid, this pool of inflammation is now in your lungs. And so your lung cells, right, the alveoli, the poor lung cells, is trying to exchange oxygen, right? Every time you take a deep breath, right, oxygen is exchanged through the lung cells, right? Your lung cells have now been drowned from the pool of fluid and inflammation that is occurring. And as your lung cells are being drowned out, guess what? You have shortness of breath as a result. And your oxygen levels drop. Your oxygen level drops because your lung cells are drowning in this pool of inflammation. We call that viral pneumonia. Viral pneumonia is when your lungs get drowned out with inflammation, right? With that. Do you now understand why your oxygen level drops with coronavirus? Does that make sense? Did I explain it okay for you guys? Right? Did I explain it okay for you guys? Because that is why oxygen level drops in coronavirus, and we use that measure to determine if you need to be hospitalized. Because if you can't have enough oxygen, that's not good for your body, right? So we hospitalize you, we give you oxygen, we give you all these treatments through the IV, and as your oxygen level continues to drop, right? I'm seeing a lot of yeses here now. Yay! I have converted no's to yes. I converted no's to yes. Very cool. So, as your oxygen level continues to drop, we now have to bring you to the ICU, right? And we have to intubate you, and we have to give you oxygen to breathe for you. This is why patients with coronavirus, if their disease progresses, they end up on intubation. They end up on a respirator that is breathing for them because their lungs can no longer breathe. They tire out. Their lungs tire out. The respirator is doing the breathing with that. And so guys, that is how coronavirus kills. Okay, that is how coronavirus kills. It's really your immune system trying to defend itself against the virus, creating inflammation, creating fluid, and then your lungs kind of drown out with that. It's very, very scary, right? By the way, did you know that shortness of breath, cough, and fever isn't the only symptoms of coronavirus? What are the other symptoms of coronavirus, guys? Type out, what are the other symptoms of coronavirus? What have you heard are the other symptoms besides shortness of breath and fever and cough, which we all heard of? What are some of the other symptoms? I want to see what you guys have heard, okay? I want to see what you guys have heard with that. And with that. Yes, Jessica says loss of taste and smell. Yes, one of my patients with coronavirus, actually that's one of their first symptoms is actually loss of taste and smell. So that means coronavirus went up here, right? And kind of affected the brain's ability to do that. Have you heard of the coronavirus rash, the COVID-19 rash? It is a rash that occurs in the feet. We've seen that. It is a rash that occurs in the feet. Yes. Esmeralda says sore throat. Yes. Gary says lost taste and smell. Yes. Beatrice says headache. Yes, I've seen a lot of headaches, Beatrice, with coronavirus. I don't know if it's partially because of the dehydration that goes along with that. When you're sick, you're no longer eating, you get a dehydrated headache. Cynthia says diarrhea. Yes, I have seen GI side effects from coronavirus, guys. I've seen GI side effects. Now, it doesn't mean everyone is going to have those GI side effects, but the GI side effects can occur. So if you were to look on a spectrum, right, a spectrum of the frequency of symptoms, right, the fever is probably up there high, cough is probably up there high, right? Shortness of breath is up there really high. So GI side effects are in there. It's just not as high. It's probably down here somewhere with that. Loss of appetite. Yes. Can't smell. You guys are good. Yeah. Chills, fatigue. You guys are good. Holy moly. You guys got it all here. Loss of taste, lethargy. Did you know in children, we're starting to see a cluster of symptoms with coronavirus in kids. We've seen this in some kids who are hospitalized in New York. In children, and it's not in the majority of children, but there is enough of it that we've noticed, they get an autoimmune flare-up. Coronavirus does something to their immune system where they break out in like a rash. Very similar to a condition that we call Kawasaki's disease. Kawasaki's disease is a condition in children where they have fever, sore throats, and they break out in a rash. Sometimes they get like swollen lymph nodes and things of that sort. So we're seeing something like Kawasaki's disease in children who have been infected with coronavirus. So that's another symptom that is quite interesting. Sandra says, I heard back pain is a possibility. Yeah, back pain can be a possibility with a lot of things, Sandra. But yes, definitely. Janice says vomiting. Yes, that's part of the GI conditions and dizziness. Is the rash more prevalent in children than adults? They're both not that prevalent. Can you get itchy eye and conjunctivitis? Yes, you can. I've seen that. Again, I haven't seen a lot of prevalence, joint pains. Guys, any viral infections, including the flu and coronavirus, can cause joint pains just because it's throughout your body. And so if it goes through your joints, you can get joint pains with that as well. Sandra says circulation. Ooh, something important, guys, about circulation that you should know. We are noticing more often than not, we're noticing that patients with coronavirus are getting blood clots, micro blood clots. I've admitted a few patients with coronavirus with blood clots to their lungs. We call that PE, pulmonary embolism. There's patients I've seen with blood clots to their legs. And the question is, why do you get blood clots with coronavirus? That's kind of odd, right? Kind of weird. And it has everything to do with inflammation. Sometimes so much inflammation is occurring, so much debris is occurring that that increases your body's tendency to form these micro blood clots, and if they clump together, they can get to your lungs and cause a problem. So one of the things we've been doing in the hospital, guys, for patients on coronavirus that's becoming pretty frequent, one of the treatments that we do is we actually give patients a blood thinner with coronavirus in the hospital for the prevention of these blood clots. So it's quite something that we've noticed. All these other symptoms than just your lungs, right? With that. Gary says, should older patients still hold off on elective surgeries since they take place in the hospitals, and the hospitals may not be the best setting? So Gary, it depends on how urgent that elective surgery is, right? If let's say, for example, your knee hurts and you need, a new knee, right? If you need, and your knee's been hurting for 5 years now, and the doctor says it's time for a new knee. So if it's not hurting more than a year ago, it just hurts, maybe that can wait for a few months, right? For a chronic knee pain condition. So that's elective, perhaps that can wait. But there are some elective surgeries that are more urgent than other elective surgeries, right? You know what I mean? There's some elective surgeries that are more urgent. Let's say you had a gallbladder and that has gallstones in it, and it's hurting you off and on. Maybe you don't want to wait for that gallstone to to get stuck in the tubes and the pipelines, right? So there are some elective surgeries that are more urgent than other elective surgery. So really, it just kind of depends with that. Mary says, what is the current best treatment regimen, right? Mary, best treatment regimen really depends on the presentation of coronavirus that we see in the hospital, because not everyone presents in the same way. Some folks are presenting with just diarrhea and dehydration. So the best treatment for those folks would be hydration, making sure your electrolytes are okay, right? Other folks are coming in and their oxygen levels have dropped. So those folks are treated differently, right? They'll get oxygen, they'll get medications to keep their lungs open. So the best treatment regimen, Mary, depends on the patient's presentation with coronavirus. So we are doing clinical trials to look for better treatments. You guys have heard about plasma transfusion. Have you guys heard of that? That's when we take the plasma or the antibodies of a patient who has been cured with coronavirus, and we are infusing that plasma to a patient who's actively infected with coronavirus. The studies have shown good results, guys. The studies have shown good results, that if you take the plasma and the antibodies from someone who's been cured and give it to someone who's infected, that's been good. The question is, where do you get the plasma and how do you get enough plasma, right? Those are all questions to consider. There's another medication that's FDA approved besides plasma. The other medication is called remdesivir, right? Remdesivir has been shown in clinical trials to be effective with coronavirus in patients who are hospitalized. And what it does, guys, is that the markers they were looking at was, how long do patients stay in the hospital? Can you shorten hospital stay with this medication? And so they've got some good results with that medication. Now, something you should think about is patients have come to me and asked, should I take this vitamin? Or they've seen something online, they've seen something on Facebook where there is somebody promoting a product that treats successfully coronavirus. Guys, if you see somebody promoting a product that treats coronavirus successfully, and it's a over-the-counter product and they're selling it to you, I would run away from that, right? That is a senior scam, or a scam for everyone. There's nothing that's been shown to, especially over the counter or even FDA approved, to cure coronavirus at this point with that. So be forewarned. Now, it doesn't mean that there isn't, vitamins and supplements that helps with your immune system, right? But helping with your immune system is a different thing than curing coronavirus, right? We know that there are certain vitamins that are effective for you to boost your immune system. We know vitamin C helps, we know zinc helps, we know vitamin D helps, right? There are certain vitamins that help your immune system, but we don't necessarily know any dosages specific for coronavirus because they're so new. And I'm not really, recommending that you go out and pop a whole bunch of pills. I'm a believer that your food should be your medicine, right? Your food should be your medicine, as opposed to popping a bunch of pills with that. Let me see, Adrian is asking, how fast does a person degrade from the first sign of the symptom? Adrian, there are folks who have coronavirus who never have any symptoms. They're completely asymptomatic the entire time. That's kind of scary, right? The asymptomatic spreaders. So there, I can't really say specifically that everyone who catches it is going to degrade. I could tell you that most cases, patients' symptoms are mild, and where you feel like you may just have the cold or a light flu, right? Patients who do get admitted to the hospital, those patients in general are admitted to the hospital probably after week 1, around week 2, week 3 or so is when they get admitted to the hospital. And that's a generalization. I'm not saying everyone is like that, but in general, we notice that patients in the first week of coronavirus, they're trying to deal with it at home, right? They're staying home, they're isolating, they're drinking fluids, chicken noodle soup, right? That's first week. And then it's not helping, it's getting worse and they can't breathe. So that's when, that's starting at the end of week 1 or starting of week 2. That's when they leave and they go to the ER or the urgent care and they get admitted, okay? So that's a big generalization, but normally around week 2 is when it gets super serious, guys. But it doesn't mean that there aren't exceptions. It doesn't mean that patients in week 1 don't get admitted to the hospital, because they do. And there's also a lot of patients with coronavirus that never get admitted. Most patients never get admitted to the hospital, and they're mild cases. Guys, it's already like 11:56. Am I talking till like noon?
Yeah, actually, Dr. Tran, we're going to have to wrap it up.
Okay.
And just to let everyone know, thank you very much, first of all, Dr. Tran. But more importantly, any questions that were not answered during the presentation, we can look at your questions and we can send you an answer. We can get an answer from Dr. Tran for you to answer your question offline, and we will share those answers with everyone who's interested. Before we go, we'd like to launch another quick poll. Again, thank you, Dr. Tran, fabulous information. My head is swimming right now, but let's go ahead and launch our last poll. And again, please pick all correct answers. I can protect myself from fraud and exploitation by, and I won't read all the answers for you, but if you could kind of give us an idea of what you've learned today, what the main takeaways are, we would appreciate it if you could participate in our poll. Doesn't look like many of you are voting yet, so if I could encourage you to at least complete this last poll before you leave today. Again, the question is, I can protect myself from fraud and exploitation by, looks like we're about 6% of vote collection here. Okay, so let's go ahead and close the poll and we'll share our results. And as you can see, we're kind of all over the map here. We have lots of different answers. Looks like 34% of you chose the investigating the validity of information. 27% of you also chose not disclosing personal or financial information. And then 23% of you also selected practicing skepticism and questioning unsolicited contact. And all those are great answers. So at this point, what I'd like to do is thank everyone for coming today. If we could move on to the next slide, our closing slide, please. I wanted to let everybody know, first of all, I'd like to thank our presenters, both Rahul Gupta and Dr. Trin, for the fabulous information that they provided. I'd also like to personally thank our planning committee for all of their hard work to make this event possible. Most importantly, we thank all of you for attending today. You receive a survey by email within the next couple of days. We'd appreciate it if you complete that and provide your feedback. You'll also receive a follow-up email with some resources that you can use for your own use or share. And again, any questions that were not answered during the presentation will be answered by email within 7 business days. So again, on behalf of our committee and our presenters, thank you again for joining us. Have a great rest of your day, and we'll go ahead and end the webinar now. Thank you.